at my dad's funeral, while the priest's voice was still echoing in the cold. "Quiet room." My stepmother suddenly stood up, her black dress swaying as she pointed at the house around us and screamed, "This house is mine!" Her voice cracked through the silence, like glass shattering on marble. Everyone froze. The relatives, the neighbors, even the priest stopped mid-sentence. My hands trembled as I clutched the folded tissue in my lap, because for a moment I couldn't breathe. The man lying in that coffin had been my father, my safe place, my entire childhood. And now, not even an hour after we lowered his casket into the ground, my stepmother was already fighting for his house. You ever had that happen? A funeral where grief and greed mix so thick you can almost taste it in the air? Truth is, I knew she'd do something like this. I just didn't expect her to do it this fast. To understand why her words cut through me so deeply, I have to take you back. Back to when life still felt whole, before everything cracked apart. I grew up in this very house. A 2-story suburban home with white siding, a maple tree in the front yard, and the kind of creaky wooden steps you could hear no matter how carefully you tiptoed. My dad worked long hours at a car dealership, but when he came home, he'd always bring me something small, a keychain, a sticker, sometimes just a candy bar. My mom was the heart of the home, cooking Sunday dinners that smelled of garlic and rosemary, laughing so hard her whole body shook. I was a daddy's girl through and through, but I was also my mom's shadow. When she passed away suddenly, I was 15, and my whole world cracked like thin ice under heavy boots. Dad was lost. For months he sat at the dinner table staring at her empty chair. And then, less than 2 years later, he remarried. Her name was Cynthia, the woman who would one day scream at my dad's funeral that everything he owned belonged to her. At first I tried to accept her. She moved into our house with boxes of expensive perfume, designer clothes, and an icy smile that never quite reached her eyes. She'd pat my shoulder in front of Dad, but behind closed doors, she treated me like I was a guest overstaying my welcome. "Don't touch those," she'd say if I reached for the cookies. "Your father bought them for me." Or she'd walk past my room and mutter loud enough for me to hear, "This house feels smaller with her in it." I told myself to be strong, to endure it for Dad's sake. He seemed happier not being alone, and I didn't want to take that away from him. But little by little, the house stopped feeling like mine. Cynthia filled it with glass vases I wasn't allowed to touch, rules I didn't understand, and her son, my stepbrother, who always got the bigger slice of cake, the newer gadgets, the spotlight. Dad loved me, I knew that, but it was like he was caught in the middle, trying to balance scales that were never meant to be equal. Sometimes when I'd catch him staring at me, there'd be guilt in his eyes. He must have known I was slipping away in my own home. By the time I went to college, the distance between me and Cynthia was so wide it felt like a canyon. Calls from Dad grew shorter, often interrupted by her voice in the background. "Tell her we're busy," I'd hear, or "She should stand on her own 2 feet now." And so I did. I worked, I studied, I built a life away from that house. But in my heart, every time I drove past Maple Street, past that white-sided home with the creaky steps, I still thought of it as mine. Not in the sense of possession, but in the sense of belonging. It was where my father had tucked me into bed, where my mother's laughter had echoed. It was a place stitched into my very being. Years passed. Dad grew sick. Cynthia called me only when she needed help paying for medications, never to update me on his condition out of kindness. I rushed to see him, and every time she'd stand in the corner with folded arms, sighing as if I were an intruder. Dad would smile weakly, his hand trembling as he held mine, whispering, "Don't let anyone tell you you're not my daughter. This house, it's always yours too." I didn't know what he meant by that at the time. Maybe I didn't want to know, because facing it meant admitting he was preparing for the end. And then the day came. The house filled with flowers, black suits, crying relatives, and the faint scent of polished wood from his coffin. I sat in the front row, numb, every memory flashing behind my eyes like an old film reel. And that's when Cynthia made her move. Standing up in the middle of the service, her voice rising above the hymns, she declared, "This house is mine." He promised it to me, all of it. My chest tightened, my heart thudded in my ears. Relatives gasped. Someone whispered, "Not now, Cynthia." But she ignored them. She looked right at me, her eyes sharp and full of victory, and added, You don't belong here anymore." "You never did." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout back that she was wrong, that she couldn't erase me, erase my childhood, erase my father's love. But grief held my tongue still. My throat burned, my hands went cold, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I might collapse right there among the flowers and the whispers. And yet, deep inside me, a small voice stirred. A memory. My father's weak hand squeezing mine. His words echoing, "This house. It's always yours too." Could he have meant something more? Did he leave behind something she didn't know about? I didn't have the answer then, standing there in the heavy silence after her outburst. But I was about to find out, because when the lawyer walked in holding a sealed envelope, the entire room shifted, and Cynthia's smile faltered for the first time. The lawyer's shoes clicked against the hardwood floor as he entered, each step echoing like a countdown in my chest. He was an older man, gray hair slicked back, a leather briefcase in his hand, and eyes that carried the weight of secrets. Conversations hushed, sobs quieted. Even the priest lowered his head as if he knew what was coming. Cynthia straightened her back, her lips curving into a smug little smile, as if she had orchestrated this moment herself. "Finally," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for me to hear. "The truth will be settled." My fingers curled into fists on my lap. Truth? Her version of it, maybe. But deep down, a flicker of hope whispered that my father hadn't left this world without protecting me. The lawyer cleared his throat, pulling out a thick envelope sealed with wax. He looked around the room, his gaze lingering on me for a moment, before turning to Cynthia. "By request of the deceased, this reading will be done here, in the family home, in the presence of all gathered." The room seemed to shrink, the air pressing heavy against my ribs. Relatives shifted in their seats, some leaning forward eagerly, others shaking their heads at the indecency of handling inheritance matters on the day of mourning. But no one dared to speak louder than a whisper. Cynthia, however, thrived on it. She stepped closer to the lawyer, her heels tapping sharply, her diamond earrings catching the light. "There's no need to drag this out," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with entitlement. "My husband told me everything belongs to me. The house, the accounts, even the cars. I was his wife, after all." She glanced at me, eyes gleaming with triumph. "She knows it. She's always known it." My chest ached with the urge to scream. To stand up and remind everyone I was his blood, his daughter, the one who sat by his bedside through the long nights of sickness when she was too busy at spa appointments. But I stayed seated, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The lawyer raised his hand to silence the murmurs. He adjusted his glasses, slid a stack of papers from the envelope, and began to read. "I, Robert, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament." The sound of my father's name in that solemn voice made my throat close. I pressed the tissue to my lips, fighting back tears. Cynthia tilted her chin, eyes fixed on the lawyer, as if daring him to deviate from the script she already had written in her head. "To my beloved wife, Cynthia," the lawyer continued, "I leave—" He paused, eyes flicking across the room, then back to the page. "A sum of $50,000, along with the jewelry and personal items we shared." The room gasped. Cynthia blinked, her lips parting. "What?" she hissed. The lawyer didn't stop. "The remainder of my estate, including the family home on Maple Street, all associated deeds, assets, and financial accounts, I leave to my daughter, Emily." For a moment, silence was absolute. My ears rang, my breath caught, and I could barely believe the words were real. "The house, the accounts, everything?" Cynthia staggered back, her hand clutching her chest like she'd been stabbed. "No," she whispered, shaking her head violently. "That's a lie. That can't be right." Relatives exchanged looks, some covering their mouths, others nodding in approval. My aunt let out a sharp laugh, unable to hide her satisfaction. "Robert always knew who truly cared for him," she said under her breath. Cynthia spun toward me, her face twisted in rage. You must have forced him, manipulated him while he was sick. He would never leave me with scraps." My pulse raced, shame and fury colliding in my chest. "I didn't force him," I whispered, my voice trembling but steadying with each word. "He loved me. I'm his daughter. And maybe you forgot that, but he never did." She lunged toward me, her finger jabbing in my direction. You don't deserve this house. You don't deserve any of it. He promised me. The lawyer slammed his folder shut, his tone firm. Mrs. Cynthia, these documents are legally binding. Signed, notarized, witnessed. The deed is already transferred to Emily's name. There is no promise stronger than what is written here. Cynthia's face went pale, then flushed crimson. She turned in a circle, looking at the shocked faces surrounding her, desperate for someone to side with her. He told me, she cried, her voice cracking, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. But no one moved to comfort her. No one spoke, because the truth was in the papers, and the truth didn't bend to her screams. I sat frozen, my mind reeling. Relief, guilt, grief, and anger all crashed over me like a tidal wave. My father had seen through everything, through the years of manipulation, the favoritism, the lies, and he had chosen to protect me. The girl who once felt like a guest in her own home was now the rightful heir. But instead of triumph, all I felt was the heavy weight of his absence. I wanted to turn to him, to say thank you, to cry into his shoulder like I had when I was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. But he was gone. All that was left was his last gift, justice. Cynthia's screams rang out again, raw and desperate. This isn't over. You'll regret this! Everyone here will know what kind of person you really are. She pointed at me, spittle flying from her lips, her voice hoarse with hatred. I met her gaze, my own voice quiet but cutting through the noise. The only thing they'll know is that Dad made his choice. She froze, her mouth opening and closing like she had no words left. The silence stretched, heavier than before. And then the lawyer spoke again, his voice calm but carrying a finality that made the room feel colder. There is one more clause in the will, one more instruction from Robert that must be honored. The air shifted, all eyes snapping back to him. Even Cynthia's rage paused mid-breath. One more clause? My heart thudded painfully, my palms damp against my dress. What else could my father have left behind? The lawyer adjusted his glasses, flipping to the final page of the will. His voice was steady, but the weight of his words pressed on every person in that room. Robert's last instruction, he said, was not only about the house and finances. He included a personal clause regarding the preservation of this home and the legacy within it. He looked directly at me. My breath hitched, my chest tightening as though Dad were still here, speaking through him. He wrote, "This home is to remain in Emily's name. She is not to sell it for at least 5 years, so that the memories of our family may remain intact. It is my wish that the walls of this house carry her laughter, not be stripped away by greed." My throat closed, tears welling in my eyes. It was just like him, always thinking about memory, about keeping things together, even when everything seemed to fall apart. Cynthia, however, erupted. She let out a bitter laugh that cut through the room. Memories? She sneered, pacing like a caged animal. What about my years with him? What about what he owed me for being there when he was sick? Do you people think $50,000 and some jewelry is enough for me? She turned sharply toward the crowd, her eyes darting from one face to another, looking for sympathy. But she found none. Even her own son looked away, embarrassed, fiddling with his phone like he wished he could vanish. The lawyer's tone grew firmer. Mrs. Cynthia, this clause was signed, notarized, and witnessed. It reflects Robert's clear and final intentions. Cynthia shook her head violently, her hair flying, her face twisted with rage. No, he didn't know what he was doing. He was sick. She jabbed a finger at me. She manipulated him, poisoned him against me, filled his head with lies. The accusations burned through me, but something inside had shifted. For so many years I'd shrunk under her shadow, letting her words chip away at me. Not this time. My voice wavered at first, but grew steadier with each word. I didn't poison him. I loved him. I sat by his bed when he was in pain. I listened when he was scared. I held his hand when he thought he was alone. You were too busy trying to control everything around him to see what he really needed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My aunt placed a hand on her chest, nodding silently in my direction. For the first time, I wasn't just the quiet daughter in the corner. I was the one speaking truth in a room full of half-truths. Cynthia's face turned crimson. "You ungrateful brat!" she screamed. Without me, he would have died years earlier. I gave him everything, and this is how he repays me? By humiliating me in front of everyone? Her voice cracked, desperate, as if she were trying to convince herself more than the rest of us. The lawyer closed the folder with a decisive snap. This matter is settled. The documents are final, and any challenge would be without basis. Cynthia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her body trembled, and for the first time, I saw something beneath the rage. Fear. Fear of losing control, of losing her grip on the life she had built around my father. The relatives began to murmur. Some whispered words of support to me. Others shook their heads at Cynthia, their disapproval clear. One of my cousins leaned in and whispered, "Your dad was always proud of you. He told me once that he knew you'd be the one to carry his legacy." The words wrapped around me like a blanket, soothing but also heavy. Legacy. It wasn't just about a house or money. It was about what he believed in me to hold on to. Cynthia let out a sharp sob, clutching her son's arm. "You'll all regret this," she hissed. "I'll take this to court. I'll ruin her. She doesn't deserve this house. She doesn't deserve anything." She stormed toward the door, her heels pounding the wooden floor, her son trailing awkwardly behind her. But before she reached the exit, she turned back one last time, her eyes burning holes into me. "Mark my words, Emily. This isn't the end." And then she was gone, the door slamming so hard the picture frames on the wall rattled. The silence left behind was deafening. My heart was still pounding, but I felt lighter, like a storm had passed and left me standing in its wake. I glanced at the lawyer, who gave me a small nod. "Your father was very clear," he said softly. "He wanted you to know that this house is yours. Not just the property, but the home. There's a difference. He wanted you to carry that difference with you." His words broke me. I pressed my hands to my face, sobbing quietly, not just for the loss, but for the strange, unexpected gift of being seen, truly seen, by the man I missed so desperately. Around me, relatives began to stand, offering hugs, murmuring condolences, some squeezing my shoulders as they passed. I wanted to collapse into their kindness, but a part of me stayed rigid, bracing for the battles ahead. Because Cynthia wasn't the type to give up quietly. And deep down, I knew this fight wasn't truly over. Not yet. The days after the funeral blurred together in a haze of flowers wilting in vases, casseroles left on my doorstep by sympathetic neighbors, and the echo of silence in every room of the house. My father's house, my house. I still couldn't get used to that thought. I wandered the halls at night, running my fingers along the wallpaper, half expecting to hear his cough from the bedroom or his laugh drifting up from the kitchen. Instead, all I heard was the creak of the old steps and the whisper of my own breath. Grief has a strange way of wrapping around you. It doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves. One moment I was crying into my pillow. The next I was staring at the deed in my hands, trying to remind myself this was real. Dad had protected me, and yet the weight of that protection felt heavier than I imagined. Because Cynthia wasn't gone. Not really. I found out 3 days later when the phone rang. It was my lawyer, his voice tight with caution. "Emily, I need to inform you. Cynthia has filed an intent to contest the will. She's claiming undue influence and lack of capacity." My stomach dropped. "Undue influence?" I repeated, clutching the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. "She's saying I manipulated him? That I forced him when he was sick?" The lawyer sighed. "It's a common tactic. It doesn't mean she has proof. But she's aggressive. She'll try to drag this through the courts, hoping you'll give up." My knees buckled and I sat down on the edge of Dad's old recliner. The same recliner Cynthia used to call an eyesore and threatened to throw out. Now it felt like a lifeboat in a storm. "I can't do this," I whispered. "I just lost him. I can't fight her on top of everything else." The lawyer's voice softened. "Emily, your father anticipated this. He prepared everything properly. You have the stronger case, but it will take time and strength." After the call, I sat there for hours, staring at the family photos still lining the mantel. There was one of me at age 10, holding up a fishing pole with a fish nearly bigger than me. Dad's smile in that photo was the same one he gave me the last time I saw him alive. Proud, steady, certain. And I thought, maybe that's what he saw in me. Not weakness. Strength I didn't know I had. But Cynthia? She didn't make things easy. She started showing up around the neighborhood, cornering relatives, whispering to them that I was greedy, that I had brainwashed Dad in his final days. A few cousins stopped returning my calls. An aunt I'd always trusted sent me a cold text. Maybe you should share. Family should come first. It broke me in ways I didn't expect, because it wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about my name, my worth, my place in this family. One night, as I was locking the front door, I noticed a car idling at the corner of Maple Street, a silhouette in the driver's seat, cigarette glowing red in the dark. My chest tightened. I knew it was her. She didn't leave the car, didn't approach, just sat there watching. A chill crawled down my spine. The next morning I found a note stuffed under my door. No envelope, just scribbled in angry handwriting. You won't win. This house is mine. Everyone knows it. My hands shook as I read it. For a moment I considered calling the police. But what would I say? That my stepmother couldn't let go of a house that legally wasn't hers? That grief had twisted her into something venomous? Instead, I tucked the note away, proof of her obsession, and told myself not to be afraid. But fear doesn't listen to logic. That night I double-checked the locks 3 times. I barely slept, and still, in the middle of all that dread, a spark of determination grew. She could scream, she could lie, she could throw money at lawyers, but my father's signature was stronger than her hate. The will was clear. The deed was mine. One evening, my best friend came over with takeout, insisting I eat something besides microwaved soup. We sat at the old kitchen table, the same one where Dad once spread out newspapers and circled used cars. She reached across and squeezed my hand. Emily, listen. This isn't just about a house. This is about you finally standing up for yourself. For years she made you feel small. Maybe this is the moment you stop letting her. I wanted to believe her. I really did. And maybe she was right. But even as I nodded, even as I forced a smile, I couldn't shake the feeling that Cynthia was planning something bigger. Something worse. I didn't have to wait long. A week after the funeral, just as I was sorting through boxes in the attic, I heard the slam of a car door outside. I peered out the window and my stomach twisted. Cynthia was walking up the driveway, her heels clicking against the pavement, her son trailing behind her with a smirk. She wasn't carrying flowers this time. She was carrying papers. Legal papers, thick and bound, clenched in her perfectly manicured hands. And as she rang the doorbell, over and over, her voice carried through the door. Open up, Emily. Let's settle this face to face. The doorbell rang again, sharp and impatient, followed by Cynthia's voice slicing through the wood. Emily! I know you're in there. Don't hide from me. This house is mine, and you know it. My heart hammered as I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the door like it might burst open any second. Her son's muffled laughter drifted through the glass, arrogant and cruel, the kind of laugh that told me they thought they had already won. For a moment, I wanted to shrink back, to let the lawyer handle it, to pretend none of this was happening. But then I remembered my father's words, remembered the will, remembered the years of being silenced in my own home. Not this time. I opened the door. Cynthia stood there in her black coat, makeup perfect, lips curled into a mocking smile. In her hand, she held a stack of documents, waving them like weapons. You might think you've won, but these will prove otherwise. I'm filing for full ownership. The courts will see you for the manipulative brat you are. Her son snickered behind her, arms crossed. I steadied my voice, even though my hands shook. You can file whatever you want, Cynthia. But the deed is in my name. Dad made sure of that. Her eyes narrowed, her smile tightening into something venomous. He was sick. He didn't know what he was signing. Everyone will believe me over you. I almost laughed at that, a bitter laugh rising from years of being dismissed. Everyone already saw the will. They saw what he wanted. You can scream all you want, but the truth doesn't change. For a second, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or the realization that her grip was slipping. But she recovered quickly, jabbing a manicured finger toward me. You'll regret this. I'll drain you in court, drag your name through the mud. You'll lose everything. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to step closer, my voice low but firm. The only thing I've lost is my father, and you can't take that pain and twist it into power. Not anymore, her son scoffed, rolling his eyes. Come on, Mom, she's bluffing. Let's just push this through. Cynthia's nostrils flared, but she didn't step inside. Instead, she shoved the papers into my chest. Fine, let's see how long you last. You don't have the money, the strength, or the family to fight me. She turned on her heel, dragging her son with her, the echo of their footsteps fading down the driveway. I stood there clutching the papers, my hands trembling. The fight wasn't over. Not legally, not emotionally. But something had shifted inside me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of her. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where my father used to sip coffee and read the morning paper, and I read every page of those legal threats. My lawyer was right. It was intimidation, smoke, and mirrors designed to scare me into surrendering. I could almost hear Dad's voice in my head, calm and steady. "Don't back down, Em. Not this time." So I didn't. Weeks passed. Letters came, hearings were scheduled, but with every step, the law stood firm on my side. Cynthia shouted in court, accused me of trickery, even broke into tears on the stand. But the documents spoke louder than her voice. The judge dismissed her claims, ruling that my father had been of sound mind, that the will was clear and binding. When the gavel struck, final and echoing, I felt my knees nearly buckle. Relief washed over me like sunlight after a long storm. Cynthia stormed out of the courtroom, her son trailing behind her, both of them spitting venom under their breath. But they were powerless now. The house, the home, was mine. Afterward, I walked back into the house alone. I set the court papers on the mantel, next to Dad's photo, and whispered, "We did it. Dad, you protected me, and I stood up like you wanted me to." My tears fell freely then. But they weren't only tears of grief. They were tears of release. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged in my own skin, in my own home. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was full of memories, full of echoes, full of him. I opened the windows wide, letting the autumn air rush in, and for a moment, it felt like he was right there beside me, smiling. The fight had been ugly, painful, and exhausting, but it left me with something more than just a house. It left me with a truth I could finally hold on to. Family isn't about who screams the loudest at a funeral. It isn't about bloodlines twisted by greed. It's about who loves you quietly, steadily, and leaves behind a legacy of care when they're gone. And that's what my father did for me. That's what no one, not Cynthia, not her son, not the courts, could ever take away. So if you're listening to this story, maybe ask yourself, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have fought even when the odds seemed stacked against you? Or would you have walked away just to escape the pain? I know one thing, I'll never regret standing up. Because sometimes justice comes late, but when it comes, it's worth every second of the wait. And now I want to hear from you. If you were me, facing a stepmother who tried to erase you from your own family, what would you have done? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if you believe that stories like this matter, that truth matters, then make sure to like this video and subscribe, because there are more stories to come. Some painful, some healing, all of them real. This was mine. And I hope in some way it helps you find your own strength too.